Advertised symbol of excellence in sports entertainment.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to 83 Weeks. And of course, we couldn't do it without the Hall of Famer, the creator of Nitro, the founder of the NWO. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Eric Bischoff. Eric, how are you, man?
I'm doing well, my friend. Doing very well. Looking forward to another exciting week. Lots of fun stuff going on. Just a good week, man. I can't wait for it.
Well, I can't wait to talk about what's going on in wrestling. And of course, we're going to take a look back at something that was pretty fun in your career once upon a time when you got your head shaved in TNA. We're actually going to do this a little different today. We're going to do a watch along. We'll give you all the details on that in a moment. And before we talk about that or modern wrestling, I want to just get a little personal update from you. You revealed to us last week that for the first time ever, you and Mrs. B were doing a get together with your neighbors. How did it go?
It was great. I've got some pretty cool neighbors. It was a lot of fun. I went out on the rec deck and cooked some amazing beef tenderloins, sliced them up real thin. Loree made a chimichurri sauce. It was a little spicy. We had that and just put out a great spread of hors d'oeuvres and appetizers and libations. And it was really quite enjoyable. It made me wonder why I didn't do it before. I got to get out of my shell. You know, I'm such a hermit here. So it was fun.
Well, I'm glad you had fun. And I know a lot of our listeners had fun this weekend. Well, a heck of an AEW show. It was a very well-reviewed show, had something for everybody. But when it was all over with, everyone was talking about two things: the violence in the Hangman Adam Page, Jon Moxley match, and whether or not it went too far. And then, of course, whether or not MJF went too far. He was victorious in sudden death, beating Bryan Danielson for the AEW World Championship. And it was an Iron Man match that went into overtime. Iron Man is my least favorite stip. We've talked about that on a lot of our podcasts. I don't like it. I don't think it makes a lot of sense. I'm not a fan of it. I thought these guys had as good of a match as you could have with that stipulation. But that's not what everyone was talking about. What everyone was talking about is MJF throwing a drink in the face of a little kid that a lot of people, when they saw it, assumed it was water because it was clear. Oops. It was his mom's tequila that got dumped on the little boy. And there was a lot of blow up on social media about this. And I think AEW tried to spring in the action to make the little kid and his family happy as best they could. But it was literally the first question asked at the press conference too. You are a guy who has often said heat is life. So I thought this would be a great time to ask you, what'd you think of that? Is there a line? When is there too much heat? Are there rules of thumb about what to do or not to do with kids? Talk me through it. What'd you think of this?
Well, first of all, were they serving straight tequila in that venue?
Well, I mean, it was a venue where they sell alcohol, so I'm sure that you probably could have had a tequila neat or on the rocks or a tequila soda or whatever. But yes, they were serving alcohol at this venue.
Okay. And that's neither here nor there as far as what we're talking about here, but I was just curious, it's kind of.
She didn't sneak it in, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, well, that's kind of where I was going with that. I was curious. Look, it's not my kind of heat, to be honest. I kind of liked being arrogant and smarmy and just totally unlikable without having to do a whole lot, if that makes sense. Sometimes you can get heat with a look or a smile or other forms of body language and the way you carry yourself. And that's kind of what I relied on. I would taunt the crowd a little bit, but I would do it in a fun way that still pissed them off without having to make any contact or risk doing something that somebody's going to come back and sue you for or get a lot of bad press. So it wasn't my kind of heat. I understand it in the moment. I understand how it can happen. I just think it's crossing a line when you do something physical, and all this isn't really physical. There's no real contact, but throwing a drink in a kid's face, I think for me personally, it's not my kind of heat. a little over the line. If you're going to do it with an adult.
Right.
Do it with somebody that's taunting you that looks like they want to come over the rail. Do it to that guy. Don't do it to a kid. That's not money heat.
Right.
It's just not. To me, it's not.
Well, I think we should also mention, and I think the world knows, I don't like MJF in real life. I don't think he's a good person. I think he's a turd human. We are not friends. We will never be friends. However, just to play devil's advocate here, he's 26 years old. And I only mention that because I think that a lot of us who are saying, oh, you should never do that, we're probably a little older. We've probably had little kids in our lives. He's playing a character. He's knee deep in this character. He's trying to make sure everyone hates him. And at 26, man, I think we can all admit we were making some choices we probably wish we had back. And this feels like this might be one. And that assumes that he has any human decency about him, which we know he doesn't. But still, I don't know. I kind of think at 26, even he probably thinks, maybe that was too far. I don't think we'll see that again.
What you know, you're very clear about your feelings about him, but do you know him personally, or
Yes.
do you do?
Yes. Turd
Okay,
human. Just a bad guy, not a good person.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I don't know him that way. I mean, I only know him peripherally. You know, I bumped into him a few times and we've hung out briefly. I do admire his work, and I do kind of stay in touch with him off and on, just, you know, supporting him and letting him know what I think of some of the stuff he's done and all that. But I don't know him personally. I've never hung out with him away from a venue or away from the wrestling business. So I don't know him personally, but I love his work. Like you, I agree, man. When you're 26 years old, especially you're 26 years old and you've been thrust into this world,
Yes.
where I think he's the hottest commodity in AEW personally.
I don't think that's debatable. Yeah, he is.
And that's a new thing, man. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to learn along the way. He's going to continue to learn along the way until he's well into his 40s, because none of this stuff comes in a playbook.
Right.
You know, you're going by instinct so much of the time, and he will learn. And I wouldn't hold it against him. You know, professionally, I'd have a chat with him if I was Tony Khan, because there's also, you know, there's risk there. You know, I guess in some places that could be considered assault and battery against a child. I don't know. It's a little risky just for heat. There's better ways to get it.
Right.
Safer ways to get it. And actually better ways to get it. It's kind of disgusting heat, right? We've heard people try to describe different forms of heat. To me, it's money heat or it's not.
There you go.
And to me, that's not quite money heat.
What would, is there anything acceptable with, sort of, cause we've seen like Hulk Hogan get in the face of grandma and her swing his cane and, you know, all that stuff. So, old people are okay. We know that, adult male fans are okay. You know, what if he had thrown the drink in the woman's face? Is that okay? Or is that
same thing? No, I just think the whole throwing a drink on somebody, anything. I know it's not physical in the form of, you know, body contact, but it's
right.
You know, if somebody threw a drink in my face in a bar, I'm knocking them the fuck out.
There you go.
I mean, there's a line, and I think that's crossing it. For me, I would rather get my heat by taunting, threatening, provoking somebody to throw a drink at me.
There you go.
That's heat. And then oversell the hell out of it and be so angry and pissed off. To me, that's money heat, is let the audience get one over on you and then just act like they committed the worst atrocity known to man. How dare they? I'm MJF, and you throw a drink and then, you know, make it look like you're going to come over the rail. There's all manners of fun that you can have with that without stepping over that line. But I would rather let the fan on the other side of the rail get one over on me and react to it than me getting one over on the fan.
I love that. That's why I wanted to talk to you about it, because you're exactly right. Getting them to throw the drink at you, that's the move. That's the money.
And here's why, from a psychological point of view, and I could be just, my head could be completely up my ass on this, but this is just how I feel in this moment. Because when you taunt the crowd, you get the crowd to react. And they, for example, if the woman would have thrown the drink on MJF, everybody in that arena wishes they could be her. So you're kind of collectively creating this moment where one fan is able to express their disdain for you, and the whole crowd would have gotten behind her in a way that would have been money heat. But I think throwing the drink on the kid, and I'm sure a lot of it was subconscious, and maybe some people didn't even care. You know, who knows? It's a wrestling event. But I think by being the aggressor and throwing a drink, especially on a little kid, that falls into the disgust category, and that's not the kind of heat you want.
And Eric, I'm pretty excited about today. We're going to be watching a very special episode of Impact. This is the second episode of the Monday format. It went down on March 15th, 2010. And you can watch along with us at home. I want to encourage you to check out impactwrestling.com/packages. That's impactwrestling.com/packages, and use the promo code Jeff. That's JEFF, just like he spells it. impactwrestling.com/packages. And if you've already got Impact Plus, we'll just fire it up, hover over and select Classic Impact from 2010. Then you want to go to March 15th, 2010. It's March 15th, 2010. And Eric, I think I'm ready to go on my end. Are you ready to go on your end?
I am so ready.
Well, here we go. Let's take a look at a very special Monday Night Impact where somebody's getting a little trim. It's going to be a bad day for you.
Careful how you say that.
Yeah, I forget there's an old school slang term there. Let's get to it here in 3, 2, 1, play.
This is the biggest night in the history of TNA. This is TNA's reckoning day, brother.
Hogan can stand only so much before he gets involved.
Referee Mike Posey's got to try and get some control here.
There he is! The return of the Icon Sting!
It's Judgment Day for Flair and AJ, baby!
What's going on here? What the hell are we witnessing?
Hey, Flair! We're gonna finish this before the night's over, and it's gonna be a no disqualification, brother!
You owe me an explanation.
I owe you nothing, Dixie. I owe you nothing.
You want to mix it up tonight? Well, you're going to get your chance, and I hope you're ready, because you're in a match.
In a match? Against who? Only the hottest free agent in professional wrestling! Ow! He beat Sting!
Only RVD can explode on a scene like that! You could just see the bad intentions that Sting has in his mind here.
RVD debuts here in TNA with a monumental victory, but then pays the price at the hands of the Icon Sting.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to see you go out there like that.
I promise you, this is the last time for me. I'm gonna be okay. And Abyss, he's got my back.
Wind him up! Power him down! Black hole slam!
Abyss just pinned the TNA World Heavyweight Champion!
Whoa, 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 whoa! That's Desmond Wolf! That's Jeff Hardy!
This Extreme Enigma returns to TNA!
Impact Zone explodes for the return of Jeff Hardy! What an incredible night! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to TNA's Impact on this Monday night. And as we look outside the Impact Zone, well, we see that it's a Hummer that's arrived outside the building.
Well, I like the color.
And there you see, yeah, Hulk Hogan, Abyss, Jeff Hardy, and RVD, Rob Van Dam. They've all arrived together tonight at Impact.
Some serious players just arrived, baby. Question I have is, why the hell's Abyss driving? That's got to be dangerous.
All right, so we can cut the audio here, Steve. What do you think of this open here? This is the second Monday night show. You're trying to go head to head. It was a big splash. I think Dixie and Hogan did a big press conference announcing that they had Spike TV's approval. They finally got their wish. They're going head to head with Monday Night Raw. And Wade Keller would say that TNA officials had wanted it for years, and their goal was to grow enough and maybe even just survive long enough to make this happen. And it finally happened. And I find it interesting that when it does happen at the press conference, it's Dixie and Hulk Hogan, but you just saw like the recap of the hype and the build. You were a big part of this. And even the backstage shot of the Hummer arriving, orange, of course, which is why Taz complimented the color. It felt like WCW a little bit back in the day. The formula was there. When you watch that back, what'd you think?
I was thinking, I wish this was in a bigger venue. That's all. I think, if you could imagine the same event in front of 8 or 10,000 people, it would have been a completely different vibe at home to people watching on television. And by the way, that was Matt Morgan's Hummer, just for the record. Not that anybody cares, other than maybe Matt, if he's watching. Matt, I remember that Hummer. But no, it was a good setup. It told the story. Right. And this is one of the things that I often point out. It's not being critical. It's just an observation, is that I wish they would do this more often, WWE and AEW. I wish we would see highlights, story points that led up to the event we're just going to see, not just to remind people that didn't see last week's episode. That's not it. But to really drive home to the viewer what's important tonight, why you should watch tonight, and why you do not want to touch your remote. It's kind of a call to action in a way, if it's done well. And if people would think of these packages in the beginning of the show as not a recap package, but a preview package, because you're telling the audience what's important subconsciously. But it will hold them if you tell them that something's important. You make it visually exciting. You do a great job of setting up the backstory and teasing what can happen this week. That's a very, very effective tool, and one that every successful episodic series on television today that I'm aware of utilizes that format. I have not, I'm watching, I like Your Honor as well. By the way, have you seen Your Honor, that show?
It's one of the best shows going.
Unbelievable. Bryan Cranston is just flat out incredible, particularly in this kind of a role where he transitions from the everyday guy into something much more complex and dark in some respects. But same thing, Succession, another one of my favorites. Do the same thing. I don't know why wrestling doesn't do it. I know everybody's flirted with it. WWE tried it. It's one of the things when I went to WWE in 2019, I didn't try to sell it because I was still, the ink was still wet on my business cards, but it's like, why don't we do that? Well, why are we not telling people what's important at the head of the show? Well, we tried that and it didn't work. Everybody decided we should open up Hot with Action. I don't believe it. But anyway, I liked it. Overall, I liked it. I love the vibe. I love the feel. I love the drama that we saw between Brooke and Hulk. The intrigue. Great editing. David Sahadi, good job. By the way, David Sahadi lost his father recently, and I know it's really, really hard on him. David and Lou, David Sahadi's father, had an extraordinary relationship, father-son relationship, and texted David last week and gave him my best. But David did a really good job of editing that open together.
Well, we should be talking about what's happening in the ring right now, because we see Ric Flair paired with AJ Styles, and AJ Styles is dressed like Ric Flair in 1985. And instead of the big gold belt over his shoulder, he's got the TNA world title over his shoulder. He came out and delivered a pretty calm promo talking about how Abyss is a scary looking but stupid monster, and he asked, do you really think that magic ring is going to help you when we wrestle this Sunday? I don't believe in magic rings, blah, blah, blah. And then here comes Flair, and now he's going to try to make himself bleed. He's tearing off the jacket. It is a fired up old school Ric Flair promo, and he's bleeding, just punching himself in the eye here. It's splashing on the camera. This is over the top, but a fired up Ric Flair is a believable promo. And it's hard to believe what we're watching right now. So he's just bleeding a gusher here.
Look at the look on AJ's face.
Yeah.
AJ's going, what in the hell? I'm just a kid from Georgia that likes to wrestle. Come on now. What am I doing here with this guy? I do want to talk about that a little bit because that was one of the first things. Now, the idea of pairing AJ with Rick was not my idea. I think Hulk had a lot to do with that, and spent a lot of time talking to Dixie and AJ about it. If my recall on that is correct, AJ was not comfortable. He didn't get it, and much like we've talked about what was Claire's last name?
Claire Lynch.
Yeah. AJ didn't like that either, but I think in both of these situations and pairing himself up with Rick and trying to get that, I don't want to say a rub, but trying to broaden his repertoire a little bit by working with a guy like Rick and getting, obviously the rub is there. He's Ric Flair, for God's sake. But just getting AJ out of his comfort zone, I think was an important part of the development of his character. I think this was an important part. I think Claire Lynch was an important part of AJ learning how to get outside of himself as a character. And I think it probably paid big dividends and is paying big dividends right now.
So now we see Jeff Hardy come down to the ring, and Styles is yelling at him. And this is a different look for Jeff Hardy. He's wearing a hat. He's got the face paint. He's got a jacket on. He doesn't have his normal look and vibe. I mean, he's always been a pretty creative guy. I mean, I think the theme song he even came out to here was one he himself made. Do you remember there being creative direction in terms of we're looking for this with your character or that with your character, or did he really handle all of the look and feel and vibe of his character and how it evolved?
I think Dixie gave Jeff kind of carte blanche to bring his own character to life in any manner and form in which Jeff felt was appropriate on any given week. I didn't find any of it like nothing Jeff ever did to me. Now, this is just, very, very subjective, right? My taste is different than a lot of people's taste when it comes to what they enjoy in professional wrestling, which is the way it should be, by the way. I never found any of the versions of Jeff's character to be compelling. Like not one stood out over the other. But fans dug it, man. Jeff had so much charisma that he could come out painted pink wearing a tutu and the crowd would still be into him. And that was just the magic of Jeff Hardy.
You talk about a special talent. You got 3 in the ring right now. I mean, when you think about wrestling Hall of Fames, it'd be hard to imagine there being a Hall of Fame that didn't have Ric Flair, Jeff Hardy, and AJ Styles. Is it difficult to watch, stuff like this at times and think, man, what could have been? Because I think if you take a look at this roster now, I mean, there are times where there's more star power on this roster than there was the WWE roster. And you had the Spike TV deal, but it always felt like there was just one thing missing that kept you guys from breaking through that glass ceiling. Did you feel that way back then?
Absolutely. And it's still frustrating for me to this day. And I made a mental note to myself on my way out to the treehouse. I call my studio my treehouse, but actually my wife does. But on my way out here, it's like, don't let it get to you. Don't get all wound up and agitated because of missed opportunity. And this is a classic missed opportunity. All of the elements were there for TNA in 2010. You had the unwavering, without question, unmitigated support of Spike TV. Spike TV wanted TNA to be more successful more than TNA, and that's a true statement. Spike TV wanted TNA to be more successful than TNA did and was willing to do whatever they could to contribute to that. That's a very, it's not usual. You know, Spike TV threw a ton of money at TNA above and beyond their license fee to bring in Hulk Hogan, to bring in Eric Bischoff, to bring in Sting, to bring in Kurt Angle. That didn't come out of Dixie's pocket.
Right.
You know, the narrative in the internet is, oh, Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff tanked TNA. We didn't make those decisions. Dixie made those decisions, and she made many of them before we even got there. But nonetheless, the talent was all there. The appetite for wrestling was there. The appetite for an alternative was certainly there. The only thing that wasn't there was the commitment to really build and grow the brand. It was how much more money can we make if we stay in the soundstage versus, all right, we know for the next 2 or 3 years we're probably going to at best break even. More than likely we're going to lose money over the first 2 or 3 years of touring this brand. They didn't do it. And I still believe to this day, if they would have been producing their television in front of a real crowd, in a real venue and not a soundstage where they do game shows and TV commercials, you would have had an entirely different outcome. TNA would still be in existence today.
We should mention that this is a pretty big time show that we're watching. Backstage, we saw a fabulous skit that we're just sort of glossing over here because we were talking about some context of things that were going on at the time. We saw you and Mick Foley have a backstage conversation where you were upset with him, and then you say, hey, we're going to turn you into a proper executive, so we're going to have you shave your head and beard. And Foley would say, yeah, but my hair is my trademark. And you say, not anymore. And then we saw a little backstage clip of an attack at the food truck. And now in the ring in 2010, the Nasty Boys and Jimmy Hart are here. And here comes Team 3D, the 23-time World Tag Team Champions. Of course, we remember them most as the Dudley Boys. Listen, I love the Nasty Boys. They're a guilty pleasure of mine. I just don't imagine that we would have seen them here in 2010. Is this just part of the Hulk Hogan package? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
There's no other way to say it. Yeah. So is Jimmy Hart. You know, that's just part of doing business with Hulk Hogan back in that period. It's funny. I can't get away from Jimmy Hart. I had a dream about Jimmy Hart last night.
Was there a red light on?
No, well, maybe, but it was, you know, in the dream, we were at a venue of some sort, and I was standing there talking to someone, might have been Hulk, can't remember in the dream, but Jimmy Hart was like running laps in what looked like a high school gymnasium. Like that's where the dream took place. And there's Jimmy Hart running laps. Like he couldn't stand still. And that's Jimmy.
We're going to have a match here. Talk about a throwback. The Nasties and Team 3D. They're going to go 4 minutes. Unbelievably, the Nasties and Jimmy Hart are going to get the win here. That's right. It's a 6-man tag. The Dudleys, along with Brother Runt, former Spike Dudley, taking on the Nasty Boys and Jimmy Hart.
Spike? I heard somewhere that Spike Dudley is now a financial advisor. Have you heard that?
He is. That is in fact true.
That is awesome. He's a great guy. I wish him nothing but success. He deserves it. And tough as hell. And that guy, talk about taking abuse. Holy cow. He was durable.
We should talk about somebody who, maybe wasn't quite as durable, at least in this environment. This is the era where Awesome Kong is going to ask for and get her release. It's just a few weeks after she got into it with Bubba the Love Sponge backstage. Awesome Kong, we know, has gone on to be a part of that Fabulous Glow series, and then was an early part of AEW. I think she's happily retired now. What was your experience working with Awesome Kong? And I know how you feel about Bubba the Love Sponge. What do you remember of this incident? Whose side were you on?
I was on Awesome Kong's side. Yeah, I loved it. You know, because Bubba, and I think he's just one of the scummiest people on earth. I have nothing but disdain for him, and zero respect. He was one of those guys that was always poking people, and he thought he was funny. He thought because he was Bubba the Love Sponge and Howard Stern's little minion, and that he had the weight of the Howard Stern kind of network behind him, that he was some kind of a big time celebrity. And the truth is he wasn't, but he acted like one. And Bubba's sense of humor was to always just mess with people.
Right.
And people that he didn't know, people
Right.
that he would first meet. The first time I met him, he started fucking with me. And if he had been a friend of Hulk's and with Hulk, I probably would have reacted a little different. But I just took it, I didn't say too much. But he was just an ass. And when you see somebody like that and is able to get away with it, because most people are pretty civilized. No one's going to haul off and knock him out just because he says smart ass stuff. Even though they want to, usually he got away with it, right? Especially when he's, traveling with Hulk, and it's like, oh, okay, whatever. But, and I don't know what happened. I don't know what precipitated the incident at all. All I knew is she went after him. And from what I heard, I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard she pretty much took it to him. If I wouldn't have already been married, I might've married her after that. It was great.
It.
But she was, truth be known, professionally speaking, she was out of line.
Yeah.
She should have just walked away, but she didn't. And I don't blame her, but she paid the price. She was a little volatile and a little tough to manage backstage. From what I've heard, I never dealt with her. I had no interaction with her whatsoever, other than saying hello and, being personable whenever I saw her backstage, but I never really sat down and talked to her or tried to lay out a match or a promo or anything like that with her.
Well, unbelievably, Jimmy Hart gets the pin here over Bubba Ray Dudley. And now the Nasties want a little more. They're here to beat up on Brother Runt. And Jimmy Hart is dragging the table into the ring. Man, Jimmy Hart involved in a 6-man tag. I don't think I had that on my bingo card here in 2010.
Yeah, neither did anybody else but Jimmy.
And Jimmy's whipping everybody with a belt. And look at there. Who's this handsome fellow?
Who is that? I can't see. I've got my screen minimized here.
Maximize your screen.
All right, I'm going to maximize my screen so I can see better. Thanks for that tidbit.
It's Jesse Neel. Thought he was Garrett's buddy.
Jesse Neel. Yes, he is. He was Garrett's buddy. I don't know if they still hang out or not. I know he did for a while. Jesse Neel was a great guy. He was a great young man. Came up through the Dudley school, which is probably how he got his break into TNA. But a former, he was in the Navy. Fine young man.
We got a lot of talent here in the ring. It's Mr. Anderson teaming with Desmond Wolfe, who we know maybe better under a different name, Mr. Nigel McGuinness. Yeah, they're going to be taking on Kurt Angle and the Pope, D'Angelo De Niro. I think you and I have spent a lot of time talking about the Pope, how we feel like this was maybe a missed opportunity. You've got a lot of bona fide main eventers here. I mean, Mr. Anderson, fresh off a WWE run where he had a lot of buzz and hype. Kurt Angle, arguably still one of the best wrestlers in the world here. Desmond Wolfe had been one of the best champions Ring of Honor ever had, and his counterparts are enjoying big success in this era in the WWE. And you got the Pope, who we all think is money, but they're here almost in a mid-card spot on the show, and they only get 3 minutes. Listen, perception's reality. Do you think maybe this wasn't the right positioning for these guys? Maybe we didn't do enough to set the right expectation, or is this just the function of, hey man, we're trying to do Crash TV and that's the way it's going to be?
I'm not sure what the thinking was on this particular match. And by the way, I want to shout out to Pope. I just saw Pope a couple of weeks ago down in Melbourne, Florida. Garrett and I had the good fortune of being on the same card with Pope and Teal Piper. I didn't even talk about that. I got to meet Teal Piper. Actually, I want to have her on the show sometime. Just do a quick interview with her. She's a very cool chick. And I when I saw Teal, I know this has nothing to do with your question, but it just occurred to me. I saw Teal and I went, wow, I got to go say hi to her. And I went to say hi to her because I'd never met her before. Well, I did when she was a little kid. But I started talking and I got teared up and had to walk away. She probably thought I was a weird guy, And eventually I circled back. I said, I'm sorry. This is just kind of an emotional thing for me. Last time I saw you was with your dad, and you were just a little kid, and now here we are on the same card.
Right.
It was really fun. But Pope was on that card too, and Garrett and I got to hang out with Pope for quite a while. He looks as good today as he did in 2010. The man does not age.
Right.
I mean, it's incredible. He looks so good, and he's such a class act.
What about Kurt Angle here in a mid-card match here?
Oh, you had to go back to that, did you? I tried to circle away from that. Tried to make a pivot. You brought me right back to it. Why the hell did you do that? Why the hell did you bring all that talent together in a 3-minute match in the middle of the show with probably not much story?
Yeah.
I can't answer that. I really can't. I don't think I was involved in booking this show other than the things that were, Hulk Hogan related. I don't know. I can't answer that. I wish I could. Here, let me admit this. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's great filler. It's great action. And it's great to have that much talent that you can afford to spread it throughout the show. So it's not like there's a downside, but from a perception perspective, to your point, it's kind of like, how important are these guys really?
Right.
I get that. I get the criticism of it. I do.
We should also mention that there's going to be blood at the end of this segment. And let's not forget, we opened this show with a bloody promo from Ric Flair, and Wade would write in the Torch, Impact is gambling based on this and last week that a lot of viewers are craving blood on cable wrestling. Was that a decision that you wanted more blood and guts? You wanted more? I mean, I know there's been initiatives that we need more ladies, and there's been initiatives that we need more fast pace and we need more crash, but was blood ever a discussion, or is this just, the time of the year, the season for the booker to just lean into it? Is, it's a go home for a pay-per-view. Is there something else at play?
Listen, I want to make it really clear here, because it's so many of the, podcasts that we do, it's Nitro, it's NWO, it's the Monday Night War era. When I was either very involved in creative or at least a part of creative, because Kevin Sullivan was really the guy that booked a lot of the stuff underneath the main event and the semi-main event kind of stories. But I was not the booker here. This was a Vince Russo Dixie thing for the most part. Again, I had certainly had influence over the format, which you probably noticed, or you did notice in the beginning of the show. But in terms of blood or no blood, that wasn't an Eric Bischoff discussion. That was a Dixie, Vince Russo. Probably Ric Flair had a lot to do with it. Rick likes to bleed. We all know that. Rick was, really intense and threw himself into this opportunity. And Rick did what has always worked for Rick. But I wasn't a part of a blood, no blood conversation. Had I been, my views on blood have always been consistent. I've never really thought it's something that should be done frequently. I think it's something that can be done very, very occasionally at the right moment, and maybe can have some added value to the dynamic of a story or presentation. But for the most part, I just think it's distracting and in a way exposes the business. And I've never been a fan of it. And I've been consistent about that from day one.
I was always a fan of Mr. Kennedy in the WWE. I thought for sure he had, a really, really bright future. We know it gets cut short there. He's going to try to pick up where he left off. A little microphone bit of calling for it to fall down from the ceiling. Now he's using it to just get right in Kurt Angle's face as Kurt's bleeding, having been hit with that MVP necklace. Just talk to me about this look and presentation and just Mr. Anderson as a whole. Did you think this character was money?
Definitely.
Yeah,
definitely. He was so good on the mic, and he wasn't excellent in the ring. He wasn't Kurt Angle. Not that too many people are, or maybe anybody is.
Right.
But he was good in the ring, and he was intense, and he was really good on the mic, and he could improv. People don't know this, but Ken spent some time studying acting, quite a bit of time, put a lot of effort into it. And while he never really made it to the big screen, so to speak, a lot of the things that he learned, he incorporated and did it very well. He's a great, great performer.
Let's track Hulk Hogan talking to Rob Van Dam and Jeff Hardy here.
Nice.
You got it, bro?
I got it.
RVD, you know what to do. It's going to be fun for you, brother.
I can't wait.
We're good?
We're good. You know it.
All right, brother.
We're good, Hulk. Thanks, dude.
Well, that's California style, man. This is Florida. This is Florida, okay? What up? What up?
Everybody on the same page, appears?
Oh, yeah, they're good. They're good. We just had a couple little surprises we're going to throw out there tonight that will keep everybody on their toes.
Right. Let's talk about surprises, Hulkster. You know, I love surprises. I love surprising the audience. Bringing in RVD and Hardy, brilliant. Stroke of genius. Don't you think I should have been in on it? Could you have at least told me about it?
Well, I apologize for that. You know, it was like a audible. You've had your hands full, brother. Come on. I mean, you got this huge deal tonight with Foley, the haircut. I mean, that's crazy stuff. And between Jeff Jarrett and Mick Foley, you know, you've been holding school and you've been really busy. So, I mean, I knew this was the right thing to do. We're a team, man. I knew you'd love it.
Okay, I apologize for even bringing it up. And as far as Foley goes, yeah, tonight I got some business to take care of. It's time certain people get reminded just exactly who's in charge.
No, brother, we're a team, man. I mean, we don't have to apologize. It sounds like my ex-wife or something. I mean,
You're right.
We're cool.
We're cool. Thanks,
no,
man.
but Hardy and RVD, come on, bro. You know the deal. They're on point. They know how to take care of this situation for us.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Great call, man.
Thank you, brother.
Great call.
That was weird.
All right, please stop there, Steve. Eric, talk me through that. I, for one, think maybe there's too much backstage stuff in wrestling these days. You know, I admit I like the old studio format of television that the Crockett's would do and Memphis would do, but I realize things have to change. Times have changed, and you need some of those different venues to tell some of these stories beyond just a guy holding a microphone in the ring. I get it. But sometimes, and that may be a good example of it, it just feels like bad soap opera. What say you?
I didn't feel that way watching that. And maybe because I'm not objective about it. What that scene did was create doubt.
Yes.
And a little tension.
I'm not saying it didn't serve its purpose, but the idea that Hulk Hogan's sitting at a desk backstage and guys are they just happen to be standing there having a conversation with a cameraman there, and then you just immediately happen to walk in. It feels a little
contrived.
Yes.
Well, it is. I mean, it has to be. You know, you need narrative. You've got a couple of narrative opportunities. You know, you've got your play-by-play in color, which should be supporting the vast majority of the narrative. They should be telling the story, the backstory, explaining the stakes, discussing what could or couldn't happen as a result of what we're seeing going on tonight, as well as calling the match and building the characters. That's where the majority of your narrative comes from. The other narrative opportunity is when you've got a wrestler with a microphone, either with, in this case, JB or me or Gene Oakland or somebody else standing there holding the mic. That's another way of performing narrative. But you need narrative to tie the stories together. And back in the Crockett's days, the stories weren't as complex. Sitcoms weren't as complex. Dramas weren't as complex. Stories were much different back in that period of time. Stories have evolved. The ways of telling stories have evolved, if you have a story. But in this case, we needed some narrative. We needed to play on a seat of doubt. And was it contrived? Sure it was. The whole office scene looked like a set. It could have been done much better. And as far as Hulk Hogan sitting behind a desk, keep in mind it was hard to get Hulk Hogan standing for any length of time or being involved. I know that sounds like an excuse, but it was a reality. We had certain workarounds. So we wanted Hulk Hogan involved. We wanted to create that tension in that scene between he and I, or some doubt. We wanted to leave the audience thinking, what's Eric really thinking? That was the intent of that scene. probably could have been done a little shorter, but I don't know that. I'm usually pretty critical of my own stuff. I think that was pretty effective. And to your point of there being too many backstage scenes, I think there's too many backstage scenes or there's too many narrative opportunities that don't really advance a story. That I agree with. But when they're done well, they're absolutely necessary.
Listen, I think it accomplished what you were looking for, is just a plot device. But I just think, as a fan watching with critical eye, so Hulk Hogan is the boss of this show and he's running the show, but he also showed up in an orange Hummer that Abyss was driving in a mask right as the show was starting. So to me, like, we got to be one or the other. We can't be both. And if we did want to have a conversation with Hulk Hogan, wouldn't he be most likely just sitting on one of the TV boxes in the hallway backstage as opposed to?
No, but this was, we were positioning Hulk as the guy with the stroke.
Yes.
Dixie Carter she owned the company, but we were positioning Hulk as her kind of right-hand man.
Right.
So I just disagree with you. I don't think it was inappropriate. You could argue that it wasn't, the production value of it wasn't what it could have been or should have been. And I would probably agree with that. But in terms of the segment itself and the way we use Hogan, I disagree, actually.
Hulk Hogan, by the way, in my opinion, that dude should be doing voiceovers for commercials. He has a great voice. Like, how is he not the voice of Ford trucks or Ram trucks or some such?
I agree. I think Hulk Hogan's voice is unique and identifiable, is his Fu Manchu and his look.
Yes.
I've often thought the same thing, man. He's got a powerful, powerful voice. And maybe it's because people associate it with professional wrestling, and that's always an uphill battle when you're selling trucks and booze and other things. But he does have a powerful voice. And then there's, then you got to get him to actually sit down and do it. That's the biggest challenge.
Well, there is that. Let's
hard
talk about
hard to motivate a guy that doesn't need money.
Yes. Well said. Somebody who is always talking about the money and is always in the money, Mr. Rob Van Dam. It's reported in the Torch that him coming in really did rub a lot of the talent the wrong way. Quote, more than one person has noted that Rob took an unnecessary shot during a recent interview when he spoke about working with the top stars in WWE, and then questioned why his fans would want to see him work with Christopher Daniels now. In general, there's a lot of grumbling amongst the longtime TNA wrestlers due to the perception that the established stars will be paid big money, yet don't work many house show dates. Although the terms of Van Dam's deal have not been disclosed, he has made it clear he's not interested in working a full-time schedule. I'm not saying this was your decision to bring him back or any of that, but I am curious. Do you remember there being any quote unquote heat amongst the other guys about Van Dam coming in?
Nothing that I could see, but that doesn't mean it didn't exist. You just got to realize, first of all, Hulk and I were both new on the scene. It's not like we had, a lot of long-standing relationships with some of the TNA veterans, if you want to call them that, people that have been there for a long time. So I'm sure they had a lot of feelings, concerns, whatever, that I never heard about, just the way it was. But it's also kind of human nature, right? You've got all this talent. It's been there from day one and are not getting the opportunities that perhaps they think they should be getting, or maybe they just would hope to get. And then all of a sudden you bring in a wave of established talent that came in from WWE or WCW or wherever, and we're big stars and we're high paid stars. Well, guess what? They're going to take up TV time. They're going to take away any hope you may have had of getting your break. And it's going to naturally breed some resentment and discomfort. And once that starts, it's a little bit like a virus, once it starts, it's easy to catch and starts to spread. It becomes more intense. I'm sure that existed, but it wasn't obvious to me.
There's Sting. We got Hulk Hogan in the ring cutting a promo, and Hogan is saying, hey, I need to know why, Sting, why? I can't get over it. It's not the first time it feels like I've been hit by a truck, but Why, Sting, why would you stab Dixie in the back? Are you jealous? Is the spotlight not shining on you enough? I know you're in the rafters. I can smell you and I can smell the fear. You're scared to death to face me. And now we see Sting walking around the rafters. So again, Hulk Hogan in the ring, cutting a promo, and Sting in the rafters. Yeah, this feels like, listen, we could say, well, this isn't original. This is a reboot. They're just ripping off Nitro. But part of me thinks you're just leaning into the nostalgia here, and clearly
it's not even nostalgia, but it's 2010. Yeah, it was, 12 years, previous that this was at a fever pitch and was driving a massive part of the wrestling audience and the success of the industry as a whole. And yes, it was a callback to that, but that was Sting's character. It is still Sting's character to this day in AEW. I don't know if they have him hanging around the rafters much anymore, but this character, this quiet, mysterious, dangerous character worked in WCW. It's what was working here, and it's still working today. Why would we have, what would we do? Bring him back as like the Chicken Man?
Right.
I mean, yeah, it maybe feels nostalgia, but that was his character. The rafter thing I could have done without, because those rafter,
that's what I was referencing.
Yeah. I mean, you're about 12 foot above the ring and it's small, and the impact of Sting being up in the rafters doesn't quite have that eerie sense of foreboding that it did when you're in a big arena and you see this little guy up there and it's, that's Sting. He's got a buzzard on his back, and that was cool. This was kind of cheesy, but it's all we had, by the way. It was either that or shoot him in the hallway. It's all we had.
Well, we got Rob Van Dam now attacking Sting from behind. And you see Hulk Hogan cheering him on here. But the basis of the promo was, why, Sting? Why did you stab Dixie in the back? Was Dixie liking being a part of the storylines? I mean, I know you guys have talked about it before, where we at least discussed your conversations with Dixie and Vince Russo about whether or not Dixie wanted to be an on-screen character. Were you for that? Were you a proponent of Dixie being a part of these storylines?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, I hesitated because I had a lot of concerns about it. In terms of her ability to perform, she didn't have a lot of experience. She was very self-conscious, and self-conscious isn't the right word, but she was overly concerned about certain things and the way she would be perceived. And anytime you go on camera and you have these kind of, oh my gosh, what are people going to think? Or you're inhibited in any way, you're going to come off somewhat contrived. So I was concerned from that perspective that she could actually deliver as a performer. And the truth is she actually did a pretty good job in many respects. She got thrust into some situations where she wasn't good. She really didn't have the ability to, not that everything should be an improv, but there's a point where if you have to spend 3.5 or 4 hours to go over a 3-minute promo, you probably shouldn't be doing it. But I did support it for the most part.
We see you come into the ring along with some security. You're going to jump in between Hogan and Sting, and you're going to get after Hogan, saying, hey, we came here to lead the company, not fight our own battles. And you made a promise to your daughter that you were done with all this last week. So be done with it. And the crowd is going to start chanting Hogan, Hogan. And they're going to show Brooke at ringside holding her face in her hands. And then you're going to walk away. And I guess Hogan's going to start trying to think long and hard about what you said. What'd you think of this creative?
Well, since I created it, I thought it was awesome.
There you go.
Look, but seriously, it's telling a story. Now you could argue, we should have been physicality involved. There should have been a better way to tell that story, but there wasn't a bit. I'm not a wrestler, right? The relationship between myself and Hulk Hogan was pretty well established at that point. It made sense to the audience. It was believable. And we've got an issue here. I thought it played out pretty well. And by the way, I thought Brooke did a great job. Brooke was a great performer. It's a shame she didn't get an opportunity to do more in the wrestling business because, number one, she is a physical specimen. She is incredibly strong. She looks great. She carries herself well. She was really good on the mic, like really, really good on the mic. Had she trained, in the ring, down at NXT or wherever, and been able to combine her backstory, her relationship as a Hogan, and really perform in the ring, she could have been a huge star.
We're seeing right now Hernandez approach Jeff Jarrett backstage. You happen to be walking up and over here in the background as Hernandez is saying, you gave me my first shot, so I want to help you deliver some payback. And then you interrupt and say, hey, the days of Jeff Jarrett making matches are over. So he's going to tell Hernandez, you're going to tell Hernandez that it's a 2-on-1 against beer money. And Jarrett is saying he shouldn't take his frustration out for him out on Hernandez. So there's some back and forth here. And of course, he's going to be a referee. And you say, your next step is going to be tearing down the ring if you screw this up. Right down the middle, Jeff. Right down the middle is how you finish this segment. This Jeff Jarrett dynamic here in 2010 in the company. What was that like?
It was weird. It was, Jeff was right there with Dixie when they tried once again to get Hulk to join TNA. I was part of that. Jeff was on the plane whenever Dixie and I and Hulk were on the jet or traveling somewhere. I mean, Jeff was right there in the middle of it. And then once the Hogan deal got done, I say Hogan deal, but it included me, obviously. Once that deal got done, it was like Jeff was on the outside looking in. At least that was the impression that I was given by Dixie. There was a weird dynamic that I could never, and to this day, and I've never talked to Jeff about it really, but there was a very bizarre dynamic between Jeff and Dixie that I could never quite put my finger on.
Well, now we see Kevin Nash and Scott Hall strutting down to the ring. And let's not sleep on Kevin Nash versus Scott Hall. It's happening here on Impact from 2010. We're going to press play here in 3, 2, 1, play. We can track it here.
I got a funny feeling this deal is just going to be a fight. There's, like we said, with two former best friends here. I mean, Nash tried to help Hall and Six-Pack get contracts here in TNA. That didn't happen. A few weeks ago, we saw a beatdown on Nash by Hall and Six-Pack. That wasn't too nice. So here we have it.
So you got Scott Hall here wrestling in a sweatshirt, jeans, and tennis shoes. Taz is even going to say Nash looks to be in much better wrestling shape than Hall. And they're going to get going. And then after just about 2 minutes, Waltman's going to jump into the ring and clip Nash's knee. Waltman's going to then sort of mock, apologize, and then handcuff Nash to the middle rope. And Hall and Waltman are just going to take turns stomping on Nash. Eric Young's going to come down and make the save. And Six and Hall fend him off, double team him. Six gives Young a face plant. Six and Hall then hold up the $25K in cash that Kevin Nash put up. So Nash wins, but it's by DQ. Does this mean anything? I mean, listen, once upon a time, having Scott Hall versus Kevin Nash in a match on your show feels like something that would have been a main event anywhere in the country. I mean, maybe even a pay-per-view. And I know that Scott Hall's probably not really there yet, and we're trying to do what we can to just tell some stories. But this just doesn't feel like it's a match of consequence. It doesn't feel special, so we're not gonna, as fans, treat it special. Fair to say?
I think it was partly that. I mean, that's a fair observation to make, but I just don't think fans wanted to see this.
Right.
It's just
they want them together, not
exactly. And there was no real build for this.
Yeah,
there was I guess you could say there was a build and there was a backstory, but not a good one. There was nothing compelling about this story. Nothing compelling about this story. It was just there to check the box. And the fans reacted accordingly. And as well as the fans just didn't want to see these two guys against each other. It's not what they wanted.
You've sort of glowed lovingly about how much you enjoy this bloodline storyline that WWE is doing these days. And you've complimented them on their diligence and having discipline and really taking their time and not rushing things. This episode so far feels like the exact opposite.
I was just going to say, this is the opposite of that.
Yes.
Here's a perfect example, and I was part of it, so I'm criticizing myself here, folks. This is an example of checking the story boxes. Yes, there was story. Yes, there was some setup, but it wasn't compelling. It wasn't a true story. It was a wrestling story, not a great story. And you can have great stories in wrestling, and we're seeing it now, and we've seen them before. This isn't it. This is an example in many respects of what not to do. It was kind of hot-shotting in a way. There should have been much more time and thought put into this. If you really believe that Scott Hall, Kevin Nash in a match against each other was something important that you could actually make money on, it should have been a 2 or 3 or 4 week build.
Right.
And there should have been compelling moments within that 3 or 4 weeks that really made the audience care one way or the other. If Scott Hall and X-Pac got their contracts, that wasn't the case.
Let's take a listen to this beer money promo here.
You know, all we ever wanted was an opportunity to show both Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff exactly what beer money was made of. Because ever since those two men walked through the doors here at TNA Wrestling, beer money's been pushed aside. We've been left in the back like a couple rookies, like a couple nobodies. Now let me ask you something. Is that any way to treat the hottest commodity in professional wrestling today? Is that any way to treat the greatest tag team in the world today? Wipe that stupid look off your face. Because the answer just isn't no. The answer is hell no. You see, Eric Bischoff gave us an opportunity. The opportunity to whip somebody's ass. The only problem is the opportunity was the founder of TNA, Jeff Jarrett. And this week, he gives us another opportunity to dish it out. Well, we're going to serve it up, and this week's plate goes to you, Hernandez. They say nice guys finish last. We're sick and tired of being the nice guys. We're sick and tired of catering to these stupid fans. From now on, it's all about beer money, making cash, and getting trashed. Jarrett, Hernandez, sorry about your damn luck.
Eric, what do you think of beer money? Are you a fan of beer money?
Very much so. Very much so. Beer money when they were at the peak of their beer moneyism, they were great. You know, I mean, I just listening to that promo, I want to break that promo down a little bit. Bobby Roode delivered what I think is the ideal promo. It didn't come off contrived. He didn't have that pace in it. Let me tell you something. Here's what I'm thinking. When I get in that ring, there's a cadence that comes with so many wrestling promos that indicate to me that it's really not the character, right? It's just memorizing stuff and trying to deliver it. And I'm not picking on James because James had the ability to do really great promos. This just wasn't one of them. This was fine. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't as real to me as Bobby Roode. Bobby Roode's came off very real to me. James Storm's came off like every other wrestling promo I've probably heard over the last 40 years. But when James and Bobby were both in tune, they were entertaining as hell. The stuff they did in the ring was entertaining. I thought their characters were the types of characters that really, the crowd related to them. They were, I don't want to say Joe Sixpack, but they were one of them. And I thought they were phenomenal. I really did.
Well, we're going to see a 2-on-1 match here against Hernandez. Jeff Jarrett's our special guest referee. You've made him call it right down the middle, or threatened him to be the guy sort of putting the ring together. And here comes Matt Morgan down to the ring. And Taz is going to say, hey, maybe he should be down here motivating Hernandez, but instead he's going to come put on the headsets.
That was weird. That was really weird.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? Why, I'm asking you, but why would we have done that? I don't know. That's weird. Coming down with the belt on, making his way down to the ring. You're going to get first of all, the audience is going to look completely away from whatever's going on in the ring. Now they're looking at Matt Morgan, who's very impressive. He's wearing the championship. He walks down like he's going to get into the ring, and he goes, now I'm going back here. I don't understand what the intention was for that. Let's get him excited so we can hurry up and let him down. I don't get that.
We're going to have a 3-minute segment here. I mean, it feels like we're trying to cram a lot of stuff in here. If you just take a look at our match times, they're all really, really fast. Like Angelina Love and Daphne was 2 minutes. The Anderson and Wolf and Kurt Angle and De Niro thing, that was 3 minutes. I mean, it's just one after another. The Nasties and Jimmy Hart at this point have had the longest match with 4 minutes. As we said, Hall and Nash was just 2 minutes. This one's just 3 minutes. This is the era where people would start to count the number of minutes in wrestling. They'd say, oh, it was a 2-hour show and there were only X number of minutes in wrestling. And I've seen some criticism, believe it or not, of AEW recently, where fans would say, man, that was a 4-hour pay-per-view and it was just all wrestling. It was just all matches. Are you sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't? Or is there a good rule of thumb as far as how much quote unquote story, and I guess Pat Patterson might call it gaga, and then how much is in-ring action? Is there in your opinion, when we're talking about discipline, is there a number, a rule of thumb?
No, I don't think there's a number. I think there's a balance in there somewhere. I think some matches require, I get frustrated because I know I say the same things over and over again. I try to find different ways to say them so that it doesn't get boring for the people listening. But your main story, your A story, is going to require a lot more narrative because it's a more complicated story and there's more at stake, hopefully. As you go down through the format into your C stories and D stories and so forth, it's going to require less backstage narrative, or as Pat Patterson would say, gaga. But the key is finding the balance. And the real challenge in the art within producing really great wrestling is not only finding that balance, but tying the narrative and the match in the ring together in a way that makes sense.
Right.
And when it's done well, nobody's counting how many minutes of wrestling versus how many minutes of backstage. Nobody cares. They only start caring and talking about it when they really don't care about what's going on in the ring, or they really don't care about the narrative. Then you're going to hear about it. But when you find that balance, that sweet spot, and there's no hard set fast rule that says your A story should have 75% of the story is being told in the ring, 25% is being told outside of the ring. Maybe there could be that. I wouldn't mind trying to explore that and fine tune that as a part of a formula that you could rinse and repeat. But for the most part, it's about finding the balance and making sure what you're doing in the ring and outside of the ring is compelling, because if it's outside of the ring and it's compelling, nobody's looking at their watch.
Right.
By the way, Jeff Jarrett looks better now 13 years later than he did then. What the hell?
He got a personal trainer. Isn't that crazy?
He looks awesome now. And he didn't look bad then, but it's like, oftentimes we go back and we watch these things from 10, 15 or more years ago. And you're like, oh, wow, man, that guy really looked good then. Jeff looks better now than he did then.
Totally agree. As he's pulling his shirt off here these days, my man's super tan. He's got abs. He's ready to roll. And you asked him to call it right down the middle, and he can't help himself. He's getting in the middle. We're seeing some of those famous Memphis punches.
Jeff could punch. Can.
Yes.
Could. Can. It's one thing I always loved Jeff's work in the ring. I've had issues with the characters that he's had throughout the years. Sometimes I thought they were goofy, like the stripper veil, whatever gimmick that he used to wear. He used to drive me
Venetian
crazy.
blinds.
Yeah,
Venetian
blind gimmick. But man, when it comes to in-ring storytelling, psychology, and execution, I've always put Jeff up there at the top of the list. He was so good. And
Let's
still
try
is.
here, Steve. Oh, wow. We're going to commercial, but we saw you.
Jeff Jarrett, your ass is mine next week. Mark my words. But right now, I want to talk about some business that I've got to take care of. See, it's time to clean things up around here. Not only in terms of what's going on inside of the ring, but the very look of the company, if you get my drift. Mick Foley, we've been trying week after week after week to make something out of you. It's impossible. So I've decided to take matters into my own hands. Foley, get your big ass down here, put it in the chair. Let's clean you up once and for all.
Competitive, Steve. We had our research team reach out to Vince Russo, who was handling creative here. And get ready for this. Vince Russo said, this was your idea. Quote, Eric knew that he was there to get the wrestlers over. There was never an ego with Eric as a talent. Never. We need to mark the day and time because it sounds as if Vince Russo is being complimentary of Eric Bischoff. I'm just looking around to make sure lightning doesn't strike us. What do you make of him saying, hey, this was Eric's idea and he never had an ego as a talent?
I don't remember this being my idea. It's possible and likely since it involved me.
Right.
And I wasn't subject to having to do anything that anybody else came up with. Not to sound like an arrogant prick, but that's just the way it was. So I guess it's probably true. And I didn't have an ego when it came to getting talent over. That was my job. And I was pretty good at it. It was I never had an ego about anything that I did in the ring. I mean, if you think about the stuff that I've done in the ring, I pretty much subjected myself to being humiliated, getting my ass kicked, being put in my place. That's the job of a heel. That's what heels do, is get baby faces over. If you're a good heel, the baby face you're working with is more over after your scene or your segment or your match than they are going into it. If you're good at what you do. And I was fucking awesome at what I did.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So the mandible claw is at work here. He blocked Mr. Mick Foley, blocked you from shaving his head, throws the mandible claw on you, and now here comes the big shave. And Wade was pretty critical of this, and he says, it's just astounding to see TNA burn through so many angles that historically, when milked, draw money, but get comparatively little from them because they just rush through them. Foley then woke up Bischoff and showed him his ridiculous haircut. Bischoff threw a fit, which was good for a little laughter from the crowd. Bischoff tried to cover up. Foley waddled out of the ring gloating, holding up the mirror. Listen, I think that's a fair criticism we've been talking about here, that we're rushing through some stuff. And I just can't help but wonder if maybe that's the reason that this sort of LOL TNA narrative has existed. Maybe we never really caught fire and got the momentum and all that. And it wasn't because.
No, I disagree with that. That's narrative nonsense. Look at the bully rate. Look at the Aces and Eights storyline. So when you say things, not you, but the narrative, the general narrative, oh, the TNA never really spent any time telling stories. Go back and look at that story. I would agree with Wade here, though, by the way. I think that is a very fair critique of this particular segment, but to apply that to TNA, at least during my time there overall, I think is a little bit unfair. Look at that haircut.
What did Mrs. B? I mean, you look like somebody started with Manscaped and gave up halfway.
I look fucking ridiculous. And
What
I
Mrs.
love
B
it. I love it. She was high. She was just like, oh God, just because it's not like the first time I've ever done it, right?
Right.
It's like she just shake her head. But the good news is my hair grew it's slowed down now. Look at that. What stupid. I'm trying to put my hair back on my head. That's funny. My hair grew so fast that 2 weeks later you couldn't tell anyway, so it didn't really matter.
What are you thinking of this show so far? We're coming back from a commercial break here, and we're showing the replay of the head shave just moments ago. And yeah, you putting the hair back on is good comedy stuff, man.
What do I think of this so far? I think it's 20 pounds of stuff in a 10-pound bag. I agree with Wade Miller completely on this particular episode. Too much, too fast.
Another set of talented folks here. We got Christy Hemme in the backstage area, looking as only she can look, interviewing Shannon Moore, looking as only he can look. What a look he had. All the tattoos, the crazy gear, and maybe one of the most interesting haircuts in wrestling. Very talented performer. You guys have got so much talent on this roster. I'm not going to compare it to modern day AEW. Certainly they have a much more quote unquote talent laden or bloated, or listen, if you want to put a negative or positive slant on it, no matter what, we all agree on this. A lot of guys under contract to AEW. Did you ever feel like at some point you had too many talent here in TNA, or was that not the case?
I never thought about it. You know, it wasn't my concern, to be honest. You know, if you ask me now, do I think looking back then, did we have too much talent? Probably, especially since TNA didn't tour. They didn't really do live events to any real degree. And you had a lot of talent there that were frustrated and wanted to do more, but couldn't do more. And that's just a toxic kind of stew. It brews and it ferments and it starts getting nasty. And before you know it, you've got an issue on your hands. It happened to me in WCW when I had really more talent than I could use effectively. I know it's happening in AEW because I have conversations with certain people from time to time. So Tony's facing the same thing. It's great to have a deep roster until your roster gets so deep that the people down towards the bottom of that roster start getting upset and feel like they're in the witness protection program. And that starts to metastasize. And before you know it, you've got a morale issue. And it is a problem, becomes a problem. But at this time, I didn't think about that. That wasn't my concern. My only concern at this point in time, 2010, was what can I do to help the company grow? How can we improve the format? And focusing on Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff's storyline. That was the only thing that I really focused on at this point.
Let's track it here because we've got Generation Me coming out, the future Young Bucks. They're being called out.
Generation Me, so impressive since recently joining the TNA roster. But you know, Taz, to me, if there's that true test to prove that you belong in the X Division, it's going to come Sunday in the match that defines the X Division, Ultimate X.
Wait a minute, guys. Who have we ever beaten? Well, my brother Jeremy and I, we remember a couple months back in our big debut match, and well, we defeated the two of you. You remember that?
I remember that. We remember that. But you know what? There's such a thing called luck. And you see, anytime somebody steps in this squared circle, they can beat somebody else. It happens all the time. In fact, I'll give you guys credit where credit's due. You're good, but you're not great. We are great. We are the Xbox to your Atari. You...
That was good.
You are the station wagons to our Ferraris. In fact, while we're on the topic of luck, why don't we talk about the night we spent with your girlfriends?
Whoa! I got a reaction.
There you go.
Way to get a rise out of
We got some stakes now for our pay-per-view match.
Down right here.
When,
Guns and Generation Me.
Who's that? It's Kendrick.
Brian Kendrick has hit the ring just at the absolute point that the Guns and Generation Me started to square off.
How's Kendrick's deal? He's coming out here.
Pete, we can kill the audio.
I mean, Kendrick's he's a...
What'd you think of the way we're setting up this Ultimate X match for the pay-per-view? Nice little promo and pretty fun to see the Young Bucks 13 years ago, huh?
You know, I thought the promo was good, but I mean, did you see that while I'm watching it reminded me of what I said earlier. You know, if this would have been in front of a legitimate crowd and not a studio audience crowd, this would have gotten a much better reaction, and that promo would have actually meant something. As it was, you had 2 or 3 people go, ooh, Atari Xbox comment, and it just takes the air out of it. Now, these guys were nobody in that promo was like a rock star, right? They were still learning and growing and getting comfortable doing this kind of thing. So I'm not being critical of what they said or did, but the fact that they did it in front of such a sterile environment only exacerbated it and made it feel worse than it really was. But these guys in the X division, now these guys should be what, and Taz said it, define the X division or Ultimate X or whatever. Amazing talent. I think they put on a great show here, a great match on this show. I thought it was perfect.
We should talk about one of the big decisions that we're going to discuss at the end of the show, and that's not only to go to Monday night, but to go heads up, meaning you're going 9 to 11 Eastern here. Do you recall there ever being a discussion about 8 to 10? Or was the desired idea not to have an hour lead in and really start exactly as, Monday Night Raw started?
No, there was no, I mean, maybe it was discussed between Dixie and Spike, but I wasn't a part of that conversation. If it was, my thing was that if we want to make a statement, if we want to create controversy, if we want to create a buzz and get people talking about TNA in a meaningful way, then do it head to head. And I hate to reduce things always to a fight, but that's what this was. TNA was fighting for recognition. TNA had a roster full of outstanding talent, but they were the tree that fell in the forest and nobody was around to hear it. Well, how do you fix that? Go head to head. Go pick a fight with the biggest, toughest kid in school. And if you come out okay, you're gold. And that's what we were trying to do here. We were just trying to establish TNA, to make people aware of who was in TNA, and to put on the best show that we could.
Let's track this promo from Abyss. He's going to say something you got to hear.
Next, Abyss.
Hey, JB, X marks the spot, right? Well, Destination X marks the spot where I finally get my hands on AJ Styles. You see, ever since Hulk Hogan gave me this ring and all the power within it, AJ Styles and Ric Flair have been relentless in trying to take it from me. And I realized why. Because for the first time in my life, somebody is jealous of me. They want what I got. But guess what? You can't have it. You see, it's my time. It's time for this monster to start doing the taking around here, and it begins with you, AJ, when I take your TNA World Championship. And as for you, Ric Flair, I really hope he decides to get involved in tonight's main event. Because if you do, Mr. Flair, I'm gonna show you what it's like to come face to face with the monster of the ring. So what you gonna do, AJ? What you gonna do, Flair? What you gonna do when the monster Abyss runs wild? I'm crazy on you.
Now let's have a successful wrap to this show. We're going to count us back in, and then I can't wait to ask you about this Abyss promo. Let's pick it up where we left off here in 3, 2, 1, play. So listen, we're setting up, Abyss and AJ Styles. Of course, Abyss is going to be the special guest enforcer, and he's doing Hulk Hogan style promos. What you gonna do? Meanwhile, we've got AJ Styles doing his best Ric Flair. I guess we're telling the classic protege type stories. And since we're not really going to do Hogan versus Flair everywhere we go, this is a nice way to let a younger generation of talent do their thing at a high level, but also to have some real mega star power in their corners. But the thing that always stuck out to me about this is these magic powers, this special ring that everyone's jealous of, that Abyss is talking about and doting over and kissing, is a WWE Hall of Fame ring.
Well, there's that.
That's a little stupid, is it? I mean, like, what in the world are we doing?
Yeah, I was not a big fan of this. It was just a little too late 80s for me. The audience's ability to suspend their disbelief was rudely interrupted with this kind of thing. I just wasn't a fan of it. I wasn't. I don't know what else to say.
I just absolutely love the idea of AJ Styles and Ric Flair. I know in execution, it's not going to be all that well done. And part of it is probably, well, AJ Styles coming to the ring here in a robe that doesn't look like Olivia Walker made it. It looks like put together at the Hobby Lobby.
Good call. Good observation. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to be critical. Listen, somebody put a lot of effort into that, but it's not the same.
No, it's not the same. It's not.
A friend of mine often says in business, you can be better than, less than, or different than. We're just kind of less than. And even though AJ is the champ, he's out first. And Hardy, who is the challenger, is out next. AJ Styles versus Jeff Hardy is a big time match in 2023. And it was even bigger in 2010. And this show is against, a live Raw. And we're a taped show that had to be a big challenge. And ultimately, we know it's not one that's going to be super successful. The Impact rating, which was a 1.0 in their debut for their now permanent time slot, is now a 0.8 for week 2. More specifically, it had a 0.8 for first hour and a 0.80 second hour. So an average of 1.1 million viewers. And I know the AEW critics and haters are going to say, it's still outdrew AEW. I get that, but things are different. We can acknowledge, though, that the rating from week 1 to 2 is down 15%. And overall viewership is down 21.4% because the prior week we had 1.4 million viewers. And this is with a quote unquote dream match. This is in fact the lowest rating since November of 2006. When TNA was in a 1 hour late night time slot on Thursday.
What did WWE get on this night? Do you know? Do you have that?
Raw was up 8.2%.
I mean, it's total viewers. Just compare viewers to viewers.
Don't have that, but you got your ass whooped. Their rating went up, and part of it is because they loaded it up. They knew they were going to have Stone Cold Steve Austin as the guest GM. And he was going to oversee the contract signing between Bret Hart and Vince McMahon. They also put together, this is their era where they're trying to build towards WrestleMania. So they're building towards Shawn Michaels versus Chris Jericho and Triple H versus Randy Orton and John Cena versus Big Show. And then Stone Cold, man, being here for Bret and Vince. I mean, they loaded it up in a major way.
When you say that, what occurs to me is the timing for this head-to-head thing was really bad. That was a bad decision. I think the decision to go to head to head was still a good decision for the reasons that I've expressed earlier. But to decide to do it going into WrestleMania, when you got to know, we all knew everything WWE is doing is going to be really loaded up. They're really going to be gearing up for WrestleMania. It would, in retrospect, it would have been a much smarter move to do it after WrestleMania. Once the WrestleMania buzz is off, then come in and do it instead of going at this time of year. That was a bad decision. I mean, tactically, strategically, I should say.
Where you guys had a 1.1 million viewership, we had 3.7 million that night for Monday Night Raw.
So we were at about 30% in a head-to-head with a stacked WWE card. We were at about 30%, a little more than 30% of their number. That ain't good. That ain't good at all.
It is not. And Wade would actually write that Spike TV actually liked the 1.1 plus ratings on Thursday. And he says they didn't move the show and help fund new talent to see the booking send fans packing.
Who said that?
Wade Keller.
Did Wade get that information? Because Spike was thrilled. They were happy. Did Wade get that information? Does Wade have that insight because he has that one-on-one conversation with Scott Fishman from Spike TV or
Eric?
Kevin?
Come on now.
Or is that just an observation and a editorial comment?
It's called logic. Why would we trade a 1.1 on a Thursday for a 0.8 on a Monday? Like, wouldn't we rather have higher ratings throughout the week? Like, we made a move that cost us viewership.
You made a move to get press, to get awareness, to create controversy. That's why you made the move. I guarantee you, nobody sat down and said, "Ooh, we lost 0.3 of a point in overall rating. This is bad." Nobody in the TV business looks at things like that.
Eric,
they really don't.
Then why didn't it stay on Monday?
It wasn't designed to be a long-term.
Goddamn well.
No. You were stuck in your dirt sheet narrative of the time. The decision to go head-to-head wasn't based on we're going to do this for the rest of our existence with TNA. That wasn't the reason we did it. The intention wasn't to do it long-term. The intention was to get awareness and create awareness, which we achieved.
Remember when they moved Seinfeld to Monday night?
No.
Because they fucking didn't. It was working on Thursday and they left it alone. When you start moving that shit around, you lose viewers. I mean, you've talked about that yourself. How can we then say, well, we're just going to move for a little bit, but we'll move back later? We got our ass kicked and then we went back and it still wasn't the same. You had momentum and then you moved to another night.
We did not have any momentum. They were stuck in the freaking mud. There was no momentum. That's hallucinogenic dirt sheet bullshit. There was no momentum in TNA. It was flat as piss on a plate.
Then let's spend more money and get less people. That'll fucking work.
Or let's spend more money and get more attention, create more controversy, and create freaking awareness.
If less people watch it, by definition, there is less attention.
Not necessarily.
No, absolutely necessary. You're the guy who's always on here saying it's a dirt sheet narrative. But then you say, well, we got controversy. Where? Not with more people watching the show, but with goddamn dirt sheets. Yeah, you got more dirt sheet buzz. Who gives a fuck? Less people watch the show. This is a television company and fewer people watch.
21% fewer people watched this episode than the episode before that. That is a loss, but we were going up against what undoubtedly was probably one of the better Raw shows on that night based on what you told me. And the fact that we only lost 21% suggests to me that yes, indeed, we created a buzz. I guarantee you right now today, if Tony Khan put the best AEW show he could together and went up against Monday Night Raw or SmackDown, he wouldn't get 30+% in a head-to-head environment. We did. It served its purpose.
Eric, this is the most asinine conversation you've ever had on this program in the history of 83 weeks.
I disagree.
I
disagree because I look at the television business from a macro perspective and you look at it from Dave Meltzer's dirt sheet or someone that's never been in the business. Yeah, I understand. It's hard to understand for people that have never
Hey, listen up, smart ass. We sell fucking commercials based on how many people watch the goddamn show.
But you don't build brands that way. You can hear me.
Well, you cut out there. Try it again.
No.
I
can't even remember what I said.
Dude, here's what I know. Ad rates are determined based on the size of the audience. Don't bullshit us here. That's the way they determine what the ad rates are. The more people watch the show, the more you can charge for the fucking spots. You know how I know? Because that's how we sell ads on podcasting too. And that's the way I've bought radio and TV for nearly 2 decades in the mortgage business. You buy based on the viewership. You buy based on the audience. No business owner says, let's make a move and invest more money with more talent and throw more shit up against the wall with our wallet, with cash that this company's not paying for, but Spike is, something you said on this same program. And then we're going to go down 24%. That was not the plan.
No, it was not. It was not ideal. It was not, and it wasn't 24%. It was about 21%, by the way. So let's not exaggerate. If we're going to play with numbers, let's play with numbers. Let's look at it from a broader perspective. What was TNA? And I'm asking you a question that there's no way you could possibly answer. So it's a rhetorical question. But if you look at the rating, what was the average audience over a period of, let's just say 120 days leading into this effort?
According to Wade Keller, you guys were doing 1.1 plus on Thursdays.
On an average.
And by the way, this match we're watching right now, the segment right before did a 0.72. We had 2 commercial breaks there and they tuned out. So this main event, the quarter hour number 8, Q8, did a 0.74. Normally, as you know, the show builds and builds and builds, and usually the last segment is the highest rated. Unfortunately, you're up against a loaded Monday Night Raw. People wanted to see that more than they wanted to see this. So even though your overall rating here is higher, this is not the highest rated segment on the show. In fact, it's a 0.74. It barely rebounds from the double commercial break. Fans just didn't want to see it.
I don't disagree with that. This was not a great match. It was not a great story.
Right.
This was not great. But since Steve was able to give us an average audience in 2009, what was the average audience in 2010? Just curious. I don't know. I'm just curious for the sake of this discussion.
Mick Foley would react to the Impact rating. He would say, it wasn't what they hoped for. Quote, we kicked off what we all hoped would be a very exciting time for the company, and with what I felt was an excellent Impact. I know the rating wasn't quite what we were hoping for, but if we keep delivering the type of show that fans saw Monday night, I have to believe that eyeballs will start turning our way and the rating situation will take care of itself. That is an excellent attitude to have, and good for him for being the company guy. Clearly, he's telling the truth. This is not the rating we hoped, and it was a star-loaded, heavy. I mean, I could see how if you were a regular Impact viewer, you would think, man, there's a lot of stuff happening here. Now, in fairness, we've talked about, as we see Ric Flair getting black hole slammed through the ramp. I mean, this loaded. You couldn't have a bigger main event as far as star power and a post-match angle with Abyss putting Ric Flair through the ramp. There's lots of stuff here, but it just wasn't enough. And it feels like a bad idea to move to Monday night.
There was a lot of star power. There's a lot of stuff with no story.
Right.
By the way, according to producer Steve, TNA's average in 2010 ranged from 1.19 million to 2.2 billion. So I don't know. Arguable, I guess.
Well, that's the end of the show, and we're getting ready for the big pay-per-view. What'd you think watching this show back? You know, it's most memorable, I suppose, for you because you got a new haircut. You went home with a new haircut. but you did get to see some of the storylines and some of the real deal battle as you're trying to compete with WWE on Monday nights. If you had it to do over again, what would you do differently?
We weren't trying to compete with Monday Night Raw. I'll start with that. I think
that's good because you couldn't.
You're right. We couldn't. No shit, Sherlock. Congratulations. Yeah. You're the master of the obvious. And it wasn't the intent going in. Did nobody in their right mind, including anybody at Spike or anybody in TNA, would have thought that we would have been competitive with the WWE? Wasn't why we did it. But
why did you think why move to Monday then? Because Monday.
How many different times do I have to say to create awareness, to create a confrontation? How many times do I have to say that before it registers? Or maybe it will never will. I don't know.
Create awareness with who, Eric?
Amongst wrestling fans. Controversy has always, go back and look what we did with Nitro. Nitro became successful because we went head to head. That's one of the reasons it caught fire. There is a perfect example of a strategy that did work. Now, it worked for a lot of other reasons with TNT and TNA because we did make a long-term commitment. And no, it didn't start out being hugely successful, but it built to become successful.
So you didn't create commitments.
Sorry,
you didn't try to compete with Monday Night Raw with Nitro, right? I mean, you didn't go on there and give.
No, we did try to compete. It was a different situation. Head to head worked, and in this scenario, head to head was intended to create awareness, and that did work.
With the dirt sheet fans, that you were trying to get the dirt sheet.
No, with the wrestling audience across the board. This was promoted. It was promoted outside of TNA. It was promoted on Spike outside of the wrestling audience. There was a lot of promotion and support that went into it that otherwise never happened with TNA.
Why not just double down on Thursday then? You had 1.1 million people watching.
Because we wanted to let the WWE audience realize that there was an alternative to WWE.
But not to compete with them.
No. To improve our own rating.
So we want people who are watching WWE to switch over and watch your show, but we're not competing. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying.
No, we knew we couldn't compete. We wanted people to know that Ric Flair was there, that Hulk Hogan was there, that Rob Van Dam was there. We wanted the wrestling market in general to know that, yes, indeed, there was another wrestling product out there that up until that point was living in obscurity on Thursday night, preaching to the same choir over and over again, producing their show in front of the same audience each and every week that would come out faithfully and pack that soundstage with 250 people. Yes, we wanted to broaden our audience by letting the audience in general, including the WWE audience, know that there was some high power talent like Kurt Angle, like Ric Flair, like Hulk Hogan, like so many like Jeff Hardy. We wanted to let them know that they were indeed alive and performing. And we decided to go head to head in order to help achieve that. Did we hope we would get a better rating? Of course we did, to your point. But we were really trying to create awareness and build a brand. As hard as that is for people to understand. When somebody goes out,
it's hard to understand.
When you advertise on the Super Bowl and you spend 2 point whatever or 4 point whatever it is, do you hope to get a return on that investment overnight?
No.
All right.
So I just want to make sure I understand. In your opinion, people who have been watching Monday Night Raw off and on since 1993, you think they might just go channel surfing, not use their channel guide or anything like that, just start flipping around and be like, oh shit, Ric Flair's here. You think that was a better opportunity to attract WWE fans than to advertise around WWE programming in the major markets? Hey, tune in this Thursday or Tuesday or whatever the fuck, but you already established on Thursday. The successful shows that had great runs historically didn't switch nights. The shitty shows do. Thursday was when Seinfeld ran. It never switched to Monday.
You have a big assumption there. You're assuming that Spike was really happy with the ratings on Thursday nights. By the way, they weren't.
Well, they put it back on Thursday and more people watched.
They didn't have any choice. We weren't going to continue with these ratings going head to head long term. We weren't going to do that. That wasn't the intention going in, which is the mystifying part in this conversation. For whatever reason, you can't seem to wrap your head around that. The intention wasn't, let's go head to head for the rest of our schedule, the rest of TNA's existence. We're going to go head to head. That wasn't the conversation. It wasn't the intention. No matter how much you try to pretend it was, that wasn't it. We wanted to go in. We wanted to make noise. That's what we did.
You wanted fans to flip over from Monday Night Raw and see the Nasty Boys and Jimmy Hart and say, God damn, I gotta get more of it.
No, we wanted them to see Rob Van Dam. We wanted them to see Ric Flair. We wanted them to see Kurt Angle. We wanted them to be aware that there was a lot of talent that was very, very successful and had a lot of equity in WWE that now has something else to do outside of WWE. And we wanted them to be aware of that. And that's why we did it.
Well, I know why we do this show, and it's so you and I can exercise the demons. And we're doing a fair amount of that over at adfreeshows.com. And I want you to have a free trial on us. If you haven't tried it already, what are you waiting for? Now's the perfect time. Come celebrate St. Patrick's Day with adfreeshows.com. Next Friday, March 17th, will be jam-packed with all new bonus content. Our Lucky 7 will feature, you guessed it, 7 exclusive bonus episodes with Eric Bischoff, Jake Roberts, a brand new Ask Conrad, and a whole lot more. Check it out Friday, St. Patrick's Day at adfreeshows.com. And if you haven't already, you can even sign up for a free trial. You get more than a dozen of your favorite wrestling podcasts, ad-free and early, starting at just $9. That's adfreeshows.com. By the way, if your business targets 25 to 54-year-old men, there's no better place to advertise than right here on 83 Weeks. You've heard us do ads for some of the same companies for years. And why is that? Well, because it really works. And with our super targeted audience, there's very little waste. Go to advertisewitheric.com right now to find out more about advertising here on 83 Weeks. And you can also be sure to follow our shows. It's easy to do. It's at 83 Weeks on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you're looking for some good reading material, can I recommend Grateful by Eric Bischoff? It's available on Amazon, anywhere you enjoy books, or bischoffbook.com. But if you missed this show, I encourage you to go watch it. Yes, you can do it on the Impact Plus app, but we're actually streaming it as part of what we do on our YouTube. It's 83 Weeks on youtube.com. See Eric nearly bust a blood vessel this week here on 83 Weeks on youtube.com. And we've got some great new shirts and swag and merch that you can't find anywhere else to support the show over at boxofgimmicks.com. Eric, I don't know what I expected today. I knew we'd have a little lighthearted banter about a haircut, but debating the Monday night stuff and the decision to go head to head and some of the creative at the time, and maybe, as you said, 10 pounds of whatever in a 5-pound bag. This was an impact that I won't forget watching anytime soon.
Me neither. And that just goes to show you the best, one of the greatest qualities about great wrestling is you never know for sure what's going to happen. And when I went into this morning, I had no idea what was going to happen, but that's why you should tune in each and every week, right?
Well said. Eric and I will kiss and make up, and we'll see you guys next week right here on 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. Mucker father.